from the National Catholic Register. This is Register Radio, bringing light and clarity to the news and topics that affect your life.
The Catholic Church celebrates the solemnity of Corpus Christi this weekend, and so many parishes around the world will be holding public processions of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist throughout neighborhoods and cities. It's always a fascinating sight to behold, but this year, during the Eucharistic Revival, there have been hundreds of displays, public displays of worship of the Blessed Sacrament, and many of those have been caught on camera by Catholic photographer Jeff Bruno. He joins us today. Then we hear from EWTN News TV journalists Catherine Hadro and Mark Irons about their experience of the National Eucharistic Pilgrimages currently crisscrossing America. I'm Jeanette DeMello, Executive Director of the National Catholic Register and Catholic News Agency, your host here on Register Radio, along with my co-host Matthew Bunson. This Corpus Christi feast day, this Sunday that we get to celebrate Jesus in the Eucharist, is really a special one, but these events have been going on throughout this year of special devotion to the Eucharist. And today, Jeffrey Bruno has been capturing these events. He's with us today. Jeff, it's so good to have you on Register Radio.
Oh, Jeanette, Matthew, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for asking me.
So as I said, you're based in New York City, but as I said, you are flying all over the country, capturing events related to this Eucharistic revival. How many Eucharistic processions or events dedicated to our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament have you covered in the last year or so?
I say within the last year or so, you're right, that there really has been a tremendous uptick in in how many there have been. I'm not really sure, probably in the neighborhood of over 20, maybe probably less than 50. Really didn't keep count, but significantly more. Just aside from the ones I've covered, I know that on the Feast of Corpus Christi 2 years ago in New York City, on the Feast of Corpus Christi, there was about 6 processions. This past year, there was about 36 processions.
Wow.
So in a tremendous increase in, and probably because of the Eucharistic Revival. And also I don't know, I guess coming out of lockdown from pandemic and all that other stuff, people are getting out there, and it's been incredible to see.
What do you typically see?
Well, I mean, each of them is the same in that, Christ is walking on the streets with his faithful. It's interesting, there's a couple of things that I guess you could say are hallmarks of all of them. You have one of the things that's always surprising is the amount of people that will genuflect or bless themselves, or just people that are not necessarily participating in the processions, but they encounter the procession, they encounter Christ, they reverence him, and it's so beautiful to see. Because it's kind of funny, like, you could be walking down a city street and you'd pass, hundreds some odd people as you're going. You wouldn't necessarily, figure, oh, these people are Catholics and that one's a Catholic. But when you come with the Blessed Sacrament down a city street, then all of a sudden the Catholics kind of pop up. And it's a beautiful thing to see, because all of a sudden you realize, wow, much more people than you may have anticipated are Catholics, and it's a beautiful thing to see that outward expression of faith that they make, and the reverence that they make when the procession and the Blessed Sacrament passes.
Yes, and you're right. You see the priest with the monstrance. There's usually a canopy and somebody accompanying them in that to show where the pinnacle is, where the high point is. But it's amazing to see, as you have documented, people in like Times Square, which is always bustling, always busy, stopping. And I mean, what are the reactions that you've seen?
Well, I mean, I've seen, so boy, it's so varied. You see, people that will yell out or, say something like, pray for me, and then you have, there are moments where you see people will drop to their knees and they'll just, stare at the Blessed Sacrament as it passes. And then there are other times, like for example, on Pentecost, or the Pentecost Eve last year was probably the largest Eucharistic procession in recent history of New York City. And it was interesting because there were people coming up to Bishop Espiat, who's one of the auxiliary bishops in the Archdiocese in New York, the youngest bishop, in fact. And they would come up to him and, look for a blessing, and then he would bring the Blessed Sacrament over to them as he passed, and he would bless them. And, some of them would break down in tears. Some of them would be, grateful for that. And, just it's an incredible thing. And then there's also, it's funny because, I don't know, funny is the wrong word, but the solidarity, like when the faithful do process together like that amongst everybody, it's the spirit of faith that just pervades everyone. And it's a powerful, beautiful, intangible, but at the same time, something that you can physically feel it when you're going there. It's like you're really united with Christ as one. You're going down the street and this tremendous witness. And it's really the efficacy of Christ's grace that's pouring out upon everybody and spreading through everybody. And that's one of the things about processions that I think maybe, I don't know if it's maybe misunderstood or just maybe not appreciated so much, but, it's Christ is present. And his grace is there. So, a lot of people say, well, church needs to go and show itself, or, yeah, but, Christ is actually present and there. So his presence is the difference,
Right.
And I mean, he is, the one that, why people fall into that solidarity, why people fall down on their knees in reverence, why people break down in tears. And it's just so beautiful to see. It's like there can never be enough processions, if you ask me. So.
It's extremely tangible. I agree. It's contagious when you're there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're listening to Catholic photographer Jeff Bruno recount his experience covering Eucharistic processions here on Register Radio with Jeanette DeMello and Matthew Bunson. And I want to turn to Matthew for a minute. Matthew, you're a historian, a Catholic historian. I'd like to know more about the solemnity of Corpus Christi, these processions that take place on this special day. Its origins, I know, are 800 years old, really, more than that, in fact.
Well,
they started with a religious woman.
They did, but it's funny because Jeff said something I think that was really important about Christ's presence. And this is a solemnity that's the most holy body and blood of Christ. And the point of this is to proclaim that Jesus Christ really, truly, and substantially is present under the appearances of bread and wine. And that's something the Church has always believed. But we really give credit, as you just said, to a canoness, a Norbertine canoness from what would be modern-day Belgium or Liège, St. Juliana. And she had a deep devotion to the Eucharist, so much so that she spent much of her life advocating for some kind of a feast to honor and celebrate Christ's real presence in the Eucharist. And through her influence, it reached all the way to the Pope, in this case Pope Urban IV, who made that fateful decision in 1264 to declare the solemnity of Corpus Christi. But as is always the case with the Church, providentially, he was able to turn to a fairly competent theologian to help him create a series of liturgical texts for the feast and also to provide really what would be a profound theological foundation for it. And that theologian was named St. Thomas Aquinas. And it was Aquinas then who wrote and composed so many of the original texts for Corpus Christi. We think of the Adoro te, Devo te. We think also in particular of the Pange Lingua,
Right.
which is sung during the Eucharistic procession. And then also the last two stanzas are referred specifically as the Tantum Ergo and are sung, of course, at the benediction of the Blessed Sacrament. So all of these confluences of love and devotion to the Blessed Sacrament came together in that one moment in time, and we have been celebrating it ever since.
Absolutely. I was trying to teach my kids the Tanto Ergo Sacramentum this week and just in preparation. So we're going to keep listening to it so that these little boys can remember. Jeff, I want to bring you back into this conversation. You recently went to the West Coast, to California, for the launch of the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage, West Pilgrimage, right? So this is called the Junipero Serra route. It started in San Francisco. How was it? Tell me more about it.
Well, it was exciting. It's the first time I was to California, which was one thing right off the bat, which was unique. But I'd say, it's interesting for coming, like, okay, so that being said, such a, it's total culture shock, total everything is different. No, relevant touch points, don't know the roads, don't know anything, the people. But as soon as I stepped into the cathedral, I felt at home. And this is one of the things I think about the Catholic faith, just universally, is that, you can be anywhere in the world, but you walk into a church and you're home. And so I experienced that, and it was a beautiful, wonderful way to begin, before the procession began, pilgrimage procession. The processions themselves, in leaving the church, it was kind of an electric moment when the Blessed Sacrament was, crossed the threshold of the cathedral doors, because it really did mark the beginning, the beginning of this pilgrimage, and you can kind of just sense that, and it was just really an awesome, incredible moment right there, and then the processions, went on, and they were going to go to the Golden Gate Bridge, and we did have a very exciting moment, I guess you could say. There were the Archbishop Cordileone, and we processed from the cathedral to the Church of St. Dominic's, and from there everybody was loaded onto buses and vans and whatnot to be brought to the base of the Golden Gate Bridge, where we were going to cross over into Marin County. And when we got to the media, it was a big stink made about, like, media's make sure they're first, make sure we're on the first bus, first everything. So we were, and we were all having a wonderful time, chatting our way as all the vehicles, rolled there. But when our bus arrived and all the media's on board, and we stepped off, we found out that the procession had already moved forward.
Oh, wow.
There was supposed to be a moment where they were going to take a picture of Archbishop Cordileone and the Blessed Sacrament, kind of mirroring a similar thing with John Paul II. It was going to be like a photo op that was going to happen. So that didn't happen. But terrifyingly, we saw thousands of tourists, blocking the way to the bridge, and the whole thing was, just this massive clog of people, and we couldn't see the pilgrimage. We couldn't see, the procession, the Blessed Sacrament, and so we just started running, and kind of like as apologetically and as politely pushing our way through the crowd, and finally, when we got across, halfway about across the bridge, that was another moment right there, because we went from this joyful, serene, very peaceful, kind of upbeat type of thing, oh, look at what we're doing and everything, to absolute terror. And then then finally, and I can only speak for myself, but when I saw the monstrance and I saw the Blessed Sacrament, it's like a sense of peace washed over me, like I can't even tell you. And it was such a moment. And then of course, the rest of it went beautifully and normally and according to schedule.
That's great. And we have the pictures to show at CatholicNewsAgency.com. There's a wonderful photo essay there by Jeff Bruno. It's called Jesus Crosses the Golden Gate Bridge at the start of the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage. Jeff, I think St. Juliana would be so proud of your work, and so are we. We invite our listeners to go and find Jeff's work at jeffreybruno.photojournalist.com. Thanks for being with us.
Jeanette, Matthew, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and hope to see you out there on the trail at some point.
When we come back, my co-host Matthew Bunson speaks with EWTN News journalists Catherine Hadro and Mark Irons about the National Eucharistic Pilgrimages. This is Register Radio on EWTN. Stay tuned.
Let's return to Register Radio on EWTN.
And welcome back to Register Radio. I'm Matthew Bunson, Vice President and Editorial Director for EWTN News, and we're continuing our ongoing coverage of the National Eucharistic Congress and also the National Eucharistic Pilgrimages that are going to be leading to that Congress. To discuss a little bit more about the pilgrimages and the routes and the significance of it for Catholics, for the Catholic Church in the United States, and for people across America, I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Irons.
Good to be here.
Good morning. And Catherine Hadro. Mark, you are a dedicated reporter, I know, for News in Depth, but also you've sort of been press-ganged happily into covering the pilgrimage routes.
Yeah.
And absolutely. Catherine, you're doing double duty for us here at EWTN News. You not only are a reporter, but you are also one of the hosts for the National Eucharistic Congress and our coverage nationally. So, Catherine Hadro, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Grateful for this conversation.
So here we are, just weeks away from the National Eucharistic Congress, but all the focus right now is on these pilgrimages and these 4 Marian routes. So I'd love to hear from both of you. What first are the routes, and what are they traversing?
Yes. Well, as you mentioned, there are 4 different routes, each named after a different patron. My route is named St. Elizabeth Ann Seton route. And I say my route because that's the one I'm covering from start, middle, and finish, if you will. And they cover the 4 different corners of the United States. And when you look at a map and you look at where these 4 routes cover, they make a cross over the United States that ultimately converge in Indianapolis, Indiana, where, as you mentioned, we will be all together for the National Eucharistic Congress. And this is a walking pilgrimage. Yes, some of the routes will entail some driving, some boat at times, depending on the different logistics of that specific city. But I know on the Seton route, at least, the pilgrims are walking 10 to 15 miles every single day for 65 days. There's about 1,500 miles they need to cover in 2 months.
So this is almost like a Santiago de Compostela, a Camino of sorts here in America.
It is the U.S. version, right? And as Catherine said, she's on the Seton route. There's 3 other routes. I'm covering the Marion route, which starts up at the headwaters of the Mississippi River in Minnesota, going down to Indianapolis. And for 2 months, across the country, from all these different points, people are going to be processing with the Eucharist. Another point out west in San Francisco, and then in Brownsville, Texas. So forming a cross over the U.S., which is going to be pretty amazing and a pretty powerful witness for the Eucharist.
And the name of the other routes?
St. Juan Diego and then St. Junipero Serra.
Right.
And obviously, each one has a different significance when it comes to the Americas, which is really nice. Like you said, pilgrimages, the Camino de Santiago, for example, that's so European. So to have this here in the U.S. with that flavor of the Americas is really cool to see. And then even seeing the images and video coming from the kickoffs of the 4 different routes, you could see the different flavors and personalities of these different cities and corners of the U.S.
Not just the diversity of the United States, but also the remarkable diversity of American Catholicism.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mine kicked off in New Haven, Connecticut, starting off in New England. It's going to make its way, through New York, Baltimore, D.C., Philadelphia, go through Ohio, and ultimately in Indianapolis. And, mine, it was a drizzly, chilly New England morning, when the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage was kicking off. And it happened around Yale's campus, Yale graduation weekend. So again, something distinctly New England.
Yeah, the idea, though, Mark, I'll start with you, of a Marian route.
Right.
We have 3 remarkable saints,
right.
Juan Diego, Junipero Serra, and Elizabeth Ann Seton. But
right.
this one was called the Marian route.
The Marian route, yeah. And one of the main reasons for that is a major stop on this route is going to be Our Lady of Champion, the shrine that's dedicated to the only spot in the U.S. approved by the Church for a Marian apparition. So the pilgrims, I spoke to some of the perpetual pilgrims, those that are going to be traveling along for the entire 2 months of this journey. They're super excited about that stop. It's just outside of Green Bay, Wisconsin. So that's why it's called the Marian route. But as Catherine said, you're seeing all these, and as you said, just the diversity within the church. One thing that struck me about the start of the Marian route is it started in a rather remote location, northern Minnesota. There was a kickoff weekend at a town there, only about 15,000 people. But just the love for the Eucharist and people coming out and processing. A big section of the opening to this route was on a trail through the woods near the headwaters of the Mississippi River. And so they're continuing down. But yes, they will definitely be passing through Our Lady of Champion, a great Marian pilgrimage spot.
And Catherine, I follow you both on social media, but some of the images that you were posting over the weekend at the start of this were really quite striking.
There was one part in particular when it was Pentecost Sunday, and at this point there had been 3 Eucharistic processions, and then Father Roger Landry, who's the chaplain of the Eastern Seton route, then processed onto boat. And we traveled on boat, about 24 of us, for 2 hours from New Haven to Bridgeport, Connecticut, just singing praise and worship over the water for 2 hours. And it was one of those moments where it's like, how is this my job? That I get to be in adoration right now. And it was difficult. I had to, kind of check myself. Okay, I'm on duty. I'm on reporting, but also as a devout Catholic, you can't help but take in the wonder of that moment and the blessing of the seas and the winds and all the graces that comes from that. It was incredible. I mean, to be on a boat with Jesus just conjures up so many so much imagery from the Gospels.
I was going to say, yeah.
It was so special, and I could see what a beautiful start for these pilgrims. The seat en route, there's about 5 pilgrims plus Father Roger Landry, the chaplain. They're young; they're in their 20s. I was blown away by their emotional maturity, and really struck by these young people. But to see them, they get to spend this time with Jesus every single day.
And Father Roger's walking this entire route, right?
He's the only priest committed to walking the entirety of a pilgrimage. Each route will have other priests, Franciscan friars, but they're doing a rotation, I think like a week-by-week rotation.
Right.
Now, you've had the chance, both of you, to speak with the pilgrims who are on this. Talk about that experience and what they're telling you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just for some of the people on my route, some of the perpetual pilgrims, one of them in particular, Matthew, he mentioned just the power that a Eucharistic procession had for him in his own faith journey. He said his relationship with the Lord really began as a result of procession. So we can't underestimate the power and the witness that I think these public processions will have. But just speaking to a lot of the people at these opening events for the Marian route, I think a lot of people are just inspired to be around so many other Catholics. Sometimes we can be in our own bubble and not realize how universal the church is. But just talking to families who are so excited to see other families out with their children processing, talking to young adults who are super excited because they didn't think that there were so many young adults in the church. But any kind of gatherings like this, I think, reinforce just the great power that we have as a communion in Christ, and so I'm seeing a lot of that. I'm hearing a lot of people just inspired by that. One pilgrim in particular said something to me that kind of stuck with me. He said, this reinforces the idea for him that walking with Christ is not just a spiritual or emotional thing, but also a physical thing. Taking up your cross and actually walking with Jesus. So I think the public witness could be big. And we might not see it initially. That's another thing that was conveyed to me, by many priests that I've interviewed, is that we don't know the impact of this, and we can't exactly try to figure out what that might be. But just the witness of Christ moving through the land, I think it will have a fruitful impact.
Yes, Jesus is on the move, and there's so much, especially at the kickoff, anticipation. We can't wait to see what Jesus is going to do. It was, I'm sure, Mark can relate to this as well, to see, different cars and trucks driving and then stopping and turning their head over. Right. What's going on here? People walking their dog and then kneeling. It's not lost on me. St. Elizabeth Ann Seton is a convert to Catholicism. A huge part of her conversion was witnessing a Eucharistic pilgrimage for the first time in Italy, and she instinctively knelt down, and that the Eucharist helped draw her to the Catholic faith. And so, who knows who's going to witness this? What future saints? What their stories, how it might be connected to this pilgrimage? I can't wait to see.
So these routes, your two in particular, what are some of the spots where it will be stopping or processing through?
Well, like I said, the major one for me, I think, kind of as a central anchoring point is going to be the Shrine of Our Lady of Champion. But passing through major cities throughout the Midwest, Chicago, Milwaukee, I think there's something like 50 stops in Milwaukee, 50 parishes. And just so people know that this procession, at any point in time, the public can join in for different sections. There's going to be adoration, there'll be confessions, there'll be Eucharistic-focused speeches at different locations. So you can take part as long as you want. Chicago will be another big stop, but also just kind of going through the rural landscape of the Midwest, which will also be another powerful image, I think. But I would say, between the cities in the Midwest and then just kind of the flavor of the countryside, you're going to get a lot of different church communities coming together for this.
And for the Eastern route, the benediction on the Brooklyn Bridge is an iconic part of the stop for sure. New York City, Baltimore, oldest archdiocese in the United States, going to Emmitsburg, Maryland, where our patron of this path is buried. Washington, D.C., going to Steubenville, Ohio, where there is going to be what they're calling a Eucharistic boatercade on the Ohio River. So just can't wait to see the images that come out from this.
Now, the ultimate destination of all 4 routes, Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. What awaits everyone there?
Oh, my goodness. I think to see the tens of thousands of U.S. Catholics coming together solely to adore our Eucharistic Lord and to greet our pilgrims who have been, at that point, would have been walking this path for 2 months. This I've heard some people reference they see Indianapolis as the upper room of the church. We just pray. This all began on Pentecost Sunday. We just pray the Holy Spirit continues to pour down on us.
Yeah, and Catherine, I know that we are going to be having massive amounts of coverage. You're
Yes.
one of the anchors for our coverage. Where can people go to learn more about what we're going to be doing and what's happening in Indianapolis?
Well, you can go to EWTN.com and you can still sign up to participate in the National Eucharistic Congress. You can register and get a discount if you go through our website. And as Mark said, if you want to participate in the pilgrimage along the way, go to EucharisticPilgrimage.org. Come join us, participate in this really exciting chapter of the church in the U.S.
One more time, those two addresses.
EWTN.com, and you can find the link there to register, and then also EucharisticPilgrimage.org.
I know both of you will be there.
We will, yeah.
This is a very exciting time for the American church, and it is such a privilege, I know, for all of us at EWTN to have even a small part in promoting this. Well, thank you both, and safe travels as the
Out on the
processions
road.
continue. That concludes our show for this week, but remember, for more news, analysis, and commentary, check out the National Catholic Register online at ncregister.com. Thanks for joining us here on Register Radio, here on EWTN. For Jeanette DeMello and today's producer, Michael McCall, I'm Matthew Bunson. Until next week, please take care and God bless.